As I stood by the doorway, suitcase in hand, Samantha's mocking smirk faltered. The weight of her own words, tiny man, tiny performance, hung in the air like a ghost. Her arrogance, once a fortress, crumbled as I moved to leave. "Wait," she choked out, tears pooling in her eyes. But it was too late. I'd spent years believing I was small, insignificant, but walking out that door, I felt 10 feet tall. Her sobs became my anthem of freedom, a reminder that sometimes letting go is the most powerful move of all. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please hit like, drop a 1 in the comments, and subscribe for more real-life tales of strength and redemption. Share this video to inspire others who need to reclaim their power. Your support means the world, and remember, no one can make you feel small without your permission. Until next time, stay strong and keep rising. David Miller wiped his damp hands on a kitchen towel, his fingers still slightly red from peeling shrimp. The smell of garlic and thyme wafted through the warm kitchen of his suburban Austin home, mingling with the soft hum of jazz playing in the background. At 42, David had mastered the art of making guests feel welcome, and tonight's dinner party was no exception. He moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, stirring the creamy risotto while keeping an eye on the oven, where the rack of lamb was roasting to perfection. The dinner party was important to his wife, Samantha, 38, a sales executive with ambitions of climbing the corporate ladder. Her company had just launched a new product line, and this gathering was her way of networking with higher-ups and sealing her spot on the promotion shortlist. She'd told him over coffee 2 weeks ago, her voice light but her eyes sharp. "David, it's just a few colleagues and their spouses. If we make a good impression, it could mean a lot for my career." David had jumped into planning mode immediately. He'd spent hours choosing the perfect menu, balancing flavors and textures, all with the intention of making Samantha proud. He had even researched the guests, memorizing a few safe conversation topics and brushing up on the latest industry news to contribute if needed. He wanted everything to be just right, not just for Samantha, but because he truly enjoyed the chance to support her. As he lit the candles on the dining table, David took a moment to survey the scene. The house looked beautiful, with soft lighting casting a golden glow over the polished hardwood floors. The table was set with their best china, the wine glasses gleaming under the chandelier. Fresh flowers arranged with a touch of wildness added color and a subtle sweet fragrance. He had chosen the playlist carefully, a mix of smooth instrumentals and gentle vocals to fill the gaps between conversations. Everything was perfect, or at least as perfect as he could make it. The doorbell rang, pulling David from his thoughts. Samantha appeared at the top of the stairs, her silhouette framed by the soft light of the hallway. She wore a fitted green dress that brought out the sparkle in her hazel eyes, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. She looked stunning, every inch the charismatic hostess. "I think everyone's here," she said, her voice bright but edged with a hint of nervousness. "Ready when you are," David replied with an easy smile, wiping his hands one last time before heading to the door. The first guests to arrive were Bill and Karen, a senior manager and his wife. David shook Bill's hand firmly and greeted Karen with a warm smile, helping them out of their coats and offering glasses of crisp white wine. As more guests trickled in, David moved seamlessly between roles, host, chef, and bartender. He refilled drinks, swapped stories, and made sure no one's plate stayed empty for long. The living room buzzed with conversation. David noticed Samantha slip into her element, laughing at jokes, guiding discussions with the subtle skill of a seasoned sales professional. He loved watching her like this, confident and in control, her ambition shining brightly. She had always been a go-getter, and he admired that about her. Supporting her success felt natural, a way of contributing to their shared life. As they sat down to dinner, David felt a wave of satisfaction. The appetizers had been a hit, and the main course was met with genuine compliments. Bill had even asked for his risotto recipe, which made David's chest swell with quiet pride. The wine flowed easily, and the room seemed to soften under its influence. Conversations turned more personal, stories became funnier, and the group began to feel more like friends than colleagues. David found himself relaxing, enjoying the fruits of his labor. He listened as Samantha recounted a funny story about their recent vacation, drawing laughter from the table. She reached over, placing her hand on his for a brief moment, a gesture that felt warm and reassuring. He squeezed her hand gently, his way of saying, "We've got this." Every detail of the evening seemed to line up perfectly. The lamb was tender, the dessert delicate lemon tart balanced sweetness with a refreshing tang. Guests complimented the food, the decor, even the music. and each time David deflected the praise back to Samantha, letting her shine in the glow of their admiration. But beneath the perfect veneer, subtle signs flickered. Small, almost imperceptible, Samantha's laugh, a touch too loud, the way her eyes darted to her phone, lighting up with each notification, her glass of wine always half full, yet refilled often. These were whispers of something David couldn't quite hear, shadows he couldn't quite see. Yet, in that moment, none of it seemed important. The evening was a success. The house felt full of warmth and light, and David, surrounded by smiling faces and clinking glasses, felt the quiet joy of a job well done. He allowed himself to believe that this night was a promise, a sign of good things to come. Little did he know, the calm would not last. What seemed like the pinnacle of partnership and love would soon spiral into a darkness he never imagined. The cracks in the evening's perfection were small, but they were there, waiting to widen, waiting to break. As the evening wore on, the room grew warmer and the edges of conversation softened by the steady flow of wine. David was leaning back in his chair, enjoying the gentle hum of voices and the way the candlelight flickered against the wine glasses. Samantha had found her rhythm, weaving through topics effortlessly, keeping everyone engaged. It felt good, seeing her shine. It felt like the night he'd hoped for. But then, as conversations tend to do after a few too many refills, the topic turned more personal. Someone joked about the quirks of marriage, and Samantha, her cheeks flushed and eyes bright, jumped in. "Oh, trust me, living with David is an adventure," she said, her voice a notch louder than before. Her laughter rang out, drawing the room's attention. "When I first met him, I thought I'd snagged the whole package. Tall, dark, and handsome. Well, 2 out of 3 isn't bad, right?" The table chuckled lightly, the kind of laugh people give when they're not quite sure if it's okay to laugh. David's smile tightened, a reflexive response to being the punchline. He knew Samantha could be playful, but something about her tone made him shift uncomfortably in his seat. Samantha, seemingly encouraged by the reaction, went on. "I mean, when I say the whole package, I wasn't just talking about his job or his personality." She held up her hand, pinching her thumb and forefinger together with barely any space between them. "Let's just say some things didn't quite measure up." The laughter that followed was sharper, more pointed. David felt heat rise to his face, his vision blurring at the edges. He managed a tight smile, the kind that hides more than it shows. Her colleague's husband, trying to play along, asked, "And he isn't?" "Oh, bless his heart, he tries," Samantha said, drawing out the words in a sing-song lilt. "Quick to start, quicker to finish, if you know what I mean." She tossed back the last of her wine, the glass clinking as she set it down. David's knuckles turned white around his fork. His mouth opened, but no words came. His voice had buried itself somewhere deep, hidden under layers of shock and disbelief. One of the women at the table, clearly sensing the discomfort, tried to redirect. "So how about that new project at work, Sam?" But Samantha wasn't done. "No, really, it's fine," she continued, her voice breezy. "We all have our burdens to bear. Mine's just a bit smaller than most." She raised her glass, and after a hesitant beat, the rest of the table followed suit, glasses clinking in a hollow toast. The air in the room changed. Conversations that had been warm and fluid turned stiff and stilted. Smiles became strained, and eyes darted away from David, as if not looking at him could erase what had just been said. David sat there, his mind racing. His every instinct screamed at him to do something, make a joke, change the subject, stand up and walk out. But he felt paralyzed, his body betraying him just as the person he trusted most had. He took a sip of his wine, letting the bitter liquid burn his throat, a poor distraction from the ache building in his chest. The rest of the dinner blurred together. He moved through the motions, serving dessert, refilling drinks, nodding at half-heard comments. He became a ghost at his own table, present but unseen, his actions automatic. Inside, though, everything had changed. There was a cold, hollow space where his confidence used to be. Each laugh, each stolen glance between guests felt like another small cut, sharp and precise. His mind replayed Samantha's words, her gestures, the way she'd looked right through him as if he were nothing more than a prop in her performance. By the time the guests left, their goodbyes hanging in the air like echoes in an empty room, David felt drained. He stood at the door, smiling and waving, his face a mask. Samantha moved among the guests, her laughter trailing behind her as if nothing had happened. When the door finally closed, sealing them into the silence of their home, David remained still. He could hear Samantha in the kitchen, the clink of glasses, the rush of water as she rinsed the dishes. Her voice called out, light and casual. "Can you help me with these?" He forced his legs to move, his steps slow and deliberate. When he reached the kitchen, Samantha looked up, her expression unbothered. "What's wrong?" she asked, a frown tugging at the corner of her mouth. David opened his mouth to speak, but the words twisted on his tongue. How could he explain the hurt, the betrayal? How could he make her see the damage she had done when she seemed so completely unaware? "Oh, come on," she said, rolling her eyes. "Don't be so sensitive. It was just a joke. Everyone jokes about their husbands. You're overreacting." Her words hung in the air, a barrier between them, and in that moment David realized something had shifted, something fundamental. The evening had started with warmth and hope, but now only the cold, empty echo of his own voice remained. David lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling as shadows stretched and shifted in the dim light. Samantha slept soundly beside him, her breathing steady and untroubled, as if her cutting words at dinner had evaporated into nothingness. But for David, they clung to him, sharp and heavy, like stones tied to his chest. The dinner party had been a slap to the face, but now, in the silence, the sting spread deeper. His mind replayed the evening on a loop, but with every pass more memories surfaced, like dark shapes rising from still water. He began to see the pattern, the small, subtle ways Samantha had chipped away at him over the years. She'd started with playful jabs, comments masked as jokes. If he expressed an idea, she'd say, "Oh, honey, maybe stick to what you know." When he bought new clothes, she'd laugh and say, "Well, at least you're trying." At first, he had brushed them off, telling himself it was her sense of humor or his own oversensitivity, but those comments had a way of sticking, burrowing under his skin. In private, she would say things to lift him up, words that wrapped around him like a warm blanket. She'd call him smart, hard-working, the steady rock of their relationship. She'd tell him he was a great husband, that she couldn't have achieved so much without his support. He had held on to those moments, letting them patch the wounds from her public put-downs. But those moments of kindness always seemed to come before an audience. When friends were over, she would mention how she had to help him dress properly or laugh about how he couldn't fix a simple thing around the house. At family gatherings, she'd share stories that cast him as clueless or out of touch, and when he'd confront her later, she'd dismiss him. "Everyone knows I'm joking. Stop being so sensitive." David had believed her. He had believed he was the one with the problem, that his skin wasn't thick enough, that he needed to learn to laugh at himself. He'd convinced himself that these were normal marital dynamics, that all couples teased each other. But the dinner party had stripped away that comfort. The rawness of her words, the relish in her smile as she humiliated him, it had opened his eyes to a truth he could no longer ignore. He began to recount every moment that now felt tainted. The times she'd turned his vulnerabilities into punchlines. The nights when he'd sat alone, wondering if he was enough. He thought about the promotion he had gotten at work a few years back, how he'd come home with a bottle of champagne only for her to say, "That's great, I guess they didn't have many candidates this year," before launching into a monologue about her own work achievement. It dawned on him with a cold clarity that this wasn't love. Love wasn't supposed to hurt like this. It wasn't supposed to make him feel small, embarrassed, or ashamed. He had built a life with her, but with each revelation he felt the foundation cracking beneath his feet. The dinner party wasn't just a bad night. It was a symptom of something much worse, and for the first time, David allowed himself to acknowledge it. He wasn't overreacting. He had been living in the shadow of emotional abuse for years, and he needed to find a way back into the light. In the days following the dinner party, David found himself watching Samantha more closely. Little things that he had once brushed off now took on a new, sharper focus. She had always been protective of her phone, but now he noticed the way she angled it away from him, the screen always turned face down. Her work trips, once an occasional necessity, had become more frequent, the explanations vaguer. She started dressing up more, even for casual errands, with a new perfume that lingered in the air long after she'd left. When she received calls, she'd slip into another room, her voice a low hum behind closed doors. If he walked in, she'd end the call abruptly, smiling too brightly. "Just work stuff," she'd say, but her eyes never quite met his. David told himself he was being paranoid, that his insecurities were playing tricks on him. but the gut feeling gnawed at him, a persistent whisper that something was very, very wrong. Then, one Tuesday evening, as rain pattered softly against the windows, Samantha's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She was in the shower, the water running upstairs. David hesitated, his fingers hovering above the phone. His pulse thudded loudly in his ears and his mind raced through 1,000 rationalizations. But the screen lit up again and he saw the message preview. "Last night was incredible. Can't wait to see you again." His hand moved almost on its own, lifting the phone. The lock screen offered a brief moment of resistance before revealing its secrets. Her passcode, unchanged for years, was a sign of how little she thought of his suspicions. His thumb hesitated, trembling slightly, but he forced himself to open the messages. The name on the screen read Eric, accompanied by a picture of a man with a chiseled jaw and a confident grin. The conversation was a long thread of texts stretching back months. David's eyes skimmed over the messages, his brain struggling to keep up with the avalanche of betrayal. "I can't believe he still doesn't know. You're too good at playing the perfect wife." He just sat there while I made fun of him, almost too easy. David's breath caught in his throat, his vision narrowing until only the harsh white glow of the phone remained. He scrolled further back, each message a fresh wound. There were photos, intimate, candid shots of Samantha in hotel rooms, wearing lingerie he had never seen before. Their exchanges were filled with plans, hidden meetups, and shared laughter at his expense. "He thinks I'm at a work conference. You free tonight?" "Of course. I'll book the usual room." God, it feels good to be with a real man. David's knees buckled and he sank into a chair, the phone still clutched in his hand. His skin felt cold and clammy, and his heartbeat thundered in his ears. The room seemed to warp around him, the walls creeping closer, the air too thin. His mind was a jumbled mess of images: Samantha's mocking smile, Eric's smug face, the laughter of their dinner guests, the hollow clink of wine glasses. He couldn't breathe. His chest tightened, a physical manifestation of the betrayal pressing down on him. He had known something was wrong, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. His wife, the woman he had loved and supported, had been living a double life right under his nose. And she hadn't just cheated. She had enjoyed his humiliation, used his trust as a prop in her cruel games. The phone buzzed again and he flinched. Another message from Eric. "When are you telling him? I'm tired of waiting." David set the phone down, his hands numb. His mind raced through 1,000 scenarios. He wanted to storm upstairs, rip back the shower curtain, confront her with the evidence. He wanted to shout, to break things, to see the truth reflected in her shocked expression. But beneath the rage, a colder, clearer thought emerged. If he confronted her now, he'd only get more lies. She was good at twisting words, at making him doubt his own reality, and Eric, whoever he was, would slip away, leaving no trail. David needed more than a confrontation. He needed the truth, laid bare, undeniable, and inescapable. He took a deep breath, forcing his mind to slow down. His heartbeat steadied, and he wiped his damp palms on his jeans. He would not act out of anger. Instead, he would be methodical, careful. He would gather every piece of evidence, build an airtight case. He would make sure that when the truth came out, it would shatter Samantha's carefully constructed world. His eyes drifted to the kitchen window, where rain streaked against the glass. He felt the shift inside him, the hardening of resolve. He had been a victim, a pawn in their game, but no more. The man who had sat quietly at the dinner table, swallowing his pride and pain, was gone. In his place stood someone colder, sharper, and ready to reclaim his life from the ashes of her betrayal. David closed Samantha's phone and placed it exactly where he'd found it, every motion deliberate and controlled. His body moved on autopilot, but inside a storm raged. The searing heat of betrayal had given way to a cold, focused resolve. If Samantha thought she could play him for a fool, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The next morning, David called in sick to work. He sat at his desk, notepad open, his laptop glowing softly in the pre-dawn light. He mapped out his plan with the precision of a battlefield strategist, each step designed to uncover the full extent of Samantha's betrayal and protect himself from the fallout. First, he started gathering evidence. He transferred the incriminating messages from her phone to a secured drive, screenshotting every text and photo. He found a call recording app and installed it on their home phone, routing the files to his private email. When she left her laptop unattended, he mirrored her hard drive, capturing financial records, emails, and hidden social media accounts. Everything went into a carefully organized folder labeled simply Truth. Next, David met with a lawyer, someone recommended by a trusted friend, known for handling delicate divorce cases with discretion and efficiency. During the consultation, David laid out his findings, his voice steady but his hands cold against the smooth leather of the office chair. The lawyer listened intently, asking pointed questions about their finances, their home, and any shared assets. By the end of the meeting, David had a roadmap to not only protect his financial interests, but also set the groundwork for a clean break. He moved quickly to separate his finances. He opened a new bank account in his name only, transferring half of their joint savings into it, a perfectly legal move as advised by his lawyer. He updated the passwords on his personal accounts, locked down his credit, and set up alerts for any unusual activity. He even went so far as to review the mortgage documents, quietly preparing himself for the possibility that he might need to sell their home. At home, David played his role perfectly. He continued to help with chores, laughed at Samantha's stories, and maintained the same routine he always had. When she mentioned another work trip, he smiled and asked if she needed help packing. His composure was a mask, a polished surface over a churning sea of emotions. He took to journaling late at night when the house was quiet and the weight of his situation pressed down on him. He wrote down every conversation, every glance, every suspicion. It wasn't just a therapeutic exercise, it was documentation, a record of her lies and his growing clarity. He knew Samantha would try to twist the narrative when everything came to light, and he intended to have every fact lined up, ready to dismantle her story piece by piece. David's analytical skills, honed over years of managing complex marketing campaigns, became his greatest asset. He approached his situation like a project, breaking it down into tasks and deadlines. His calendar filled with reminders: meet with attorney, review bank statements, photograph documents. His spreadsheets tracked every transaction, every discrepancy, each new piece of evidence. He set traps for her lies, leading conversations that seemed casual but were designed to confirm what he already knew. When Samantha left the room to take a call, he noted the time. When she came home late, he logged her excuses. His phone became a repository of recorded conversations, each file named and dated. He even created backups of everything, storing them securely online in case his devices mysteriously malfunctioned. Through it all, he maintained a calm exterior. He still cooked dinner, still watched movies with her on the couch, still kissed her cheek when he left for work. But his movements were mechanical, his affection rehearsed. He became an actor in his own life, performing the role of the unsuspecting husband while, behind the scenes, he prepared for the final act. David had always been a problem solver, the kind of man who thrived under pressure. His colleagues called him unflappable, a trait that had earned him promotions and respect. Now, he applied that same mindset to his personal life, building a fortress of evidence and strategy around himself. Each step he took, each document he secured, added another layer of protection, insulating him from the chaos to come. He knew the storm was coming, but he would not be caught in its path. Instead, he would stand in its eye, still, calm, and ready. In the quiet hours of a Sunday afternoon, while Samantha was out on yet another work brunch, David sat at his desk, surrounded by a digital landscape of evidence. His laptop glowed with the dull light of spreadsheets and email logs, each line a breadcrumb leading deeper into the truth. He had grown numb to the explicit messages between Samantha and Eric, but the deeper he dug, the darker the revelations became. A recent bank statement caught his eye, an unusual transfer from their joint savings account to an escrow service. David's pulse quickened as he opened the document. The transaction was for a significant amount, enough to trigger a low buzz of alarm in his mind. He pulled up more records, piecing together the trail. The transfers had been small at first, just a few $100s, but over time they had added up to thousands. David accessed the escrow account using credentials he found in one of Samantha's hidden email folders. The account was tied to a property, an attractive suburban home listed under both Samantha's and Eric's names. The document on his screen showed a purchase agreement, the closing date just a few weeks away. The house was in a new development not far from where they lived now. It was clear that they had been planning a fresh start together, funded by the money he had spent a lifetime saving. The room seemed to tilt. David reached out, gripping the edge of his desk as if it were the only thing keeping him grounded. His hands were ice cold, his body locked in a strange paralysis. He forced himself to keep looking, to see everything. The down payment had come from their savings, but the monthly payments were set up on his credit line, one he hadn't authorized for such use. She was gambling his financial stability on her new life, leaving him to pick up the pieces when everything crumbled. David's mind raced through the implications. It wasn't just that she had been unfaithful. It wasn't just that she had mocked him while she built a life with someone else. She had been siphoning off their shared resources, leaving him vulnerable. If he hadn't caught it in time, he could have ended up with debts he didn't make, a home he didn't own, and a future shackled to her mistakes. The betrayal took on new dimensions. This wasn't just about love or loyalty, it was about survival. Samantha wasn't merely stepping out of their marriage, she was methodically dismantling it, brick by brick, while pretending everything was fine. Her laughter at the dinner party, her warm smiles, the casual touches, they had all been a distraction, a smokescreen while she hollowed out their life from the inside. David's mind reeled with the scope of her deception. She had weaponized his trust, using his steady contributions to their shared life as the foundation for her betrayal. Every dollar he had saved, every investment he had made had been repurposed into tools for her escape, and all the while she had stood by his side, playing the devoted wife, her true intentions hidden behind practiced smiles. A new kind of betrayal settled in his bones, one that burned cold and deep. His heartbreak hardened into something unyielding, a mix of anger and resolve. He thought of the sacrifices he had made, the dreams he had put on hold so they could build a future together. He thought of how he had trusted her, believed her, and how she had twisted that trust into a weapon. David moved with a new purpose, his actions precise and controlled. He printed every document, took screenshots of every message, cataloged every transaction. His meticulous nature, once a source of gentle teasing from Samantha, became his greatest weapon. Each file he added to his growing collection of evidence felt like a shield, a layer of armor between him and the devastation she had planned for him. He began drafting letters to his bank, to his lawyer, and to the real estate agency handling the house purchase. He set up fraud alerts on all his accounts and documented the unauthorized use of his credit line. His lawyer, now fully briefed on the new developments, advised him on his legal standing. David followed every instruction, his mind a steel trap. He knew that when the confrontation came, it needed to be absolute. There could be no room for her tears, no space for her lies. She had to face the full weight of what she had done, and he intended to ensure that she felt every consequence. This was no longer about a broken heart. It was about reclaiming his life, his security, and his dignity. The initial wound of her betrayal had scarred over, leaving something stronger in its place. David was no longer the man who had sat at the dinner table, quietly absorbing her insults. He was not the man who had hesitated before opening her phone. Those versions of him were gone, their places taken by someone sharper, someone who saw the world clearly. And as he organized his files and set his plans into motion, David felt a clarity that he hadn't known in years. The truth was no longer a shadow over him, but a light that cut through the darkness. He was ready. When the time came, he would not flinch, he would not break. He would simply present the truth and let it burn her world to the ground. David moved through the kitchen with a practiced calm, his hands steady as he seasoned the salmon and arranged vegetables on the baking sheet. The kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of rosemary and garlic, a familiar scent that seemed almost at odds with the undercurrent of tension in the room. He set the table with their best plates, poured a crisp white wine, and lit a few candles, their soft light casting gentle shadows on the walls. Everything looked perfect, warm, inviting, safe. Samantha came through the door right on time, her keys jingling as she dropped them on the counter. "What's all this?" she asked, a hint of suspicion in her voice. "Just felt like doing something nice," David replied, his voice smooth, his expression neutral. He poured her a glass of wine, handing it to her with a soft smile. "You've been working so hard lately, thought you deserved a treat." Samantha's lips curled into a hesitant smile, her posture relaxing as she slipped off her shoes and took a seat at the table. David served the meal, maintaining an easy flow of conversation about her day, her work, the latest gossip from her office. He asked just enough questions to keep her talking, drawing out details with gentle prodding. All the while, he measured her reactions, noting the way she avoided eye contact and how her phone remained close, screen down on the table. When the plates were empty and the bottle of wine sat half-finished between them, David took a deep breath. He reached under his chair and pulled out a plain manila folder, its edges worn from his repeated handling. He set it on the table between them, his hand resting on top of it. "I need to talk to you about something important," he said, his voice steady. Samantha's expression shifted, the relaxed warmth of the evening cooling into something guarded. "What's this?" "Just some things I think you should see." He opened the folder, sliding out the first stack of papers, printouts of her text messages with Eric, her face drained of color, her hand frozen around the stem of her wine glass. "David, what is this?" "It's your affair," he said plainly. "Every message, every photo, every lie." She blinked, her lips parting as if to form words, but nothing came out. David remained still, giving her space to process the weight of the evidence. Her expression cycled through confusion and fear, but she latched on to denial first. "You went through my phone? That's a violation of privacy." "Yes," he agreed. "I did. After I started noticing all the lies, the secret calls, the work trips that weren't for work, the late nights, I had to know the truth." She pushed the papers away, her voice rising. "You're paranoid, those messages. They're just jokes. You're blowing this out of proportion." David didn't react. He slid forward the next set of documents, bank statements, the escrow account, the house purchase agreement with Eric's name next to hers. "Are these just jokes too?" Her anger evaporated, replaced by a raw animal fear. "David, I can explain. It's not what it looks like." "What exactly does it look like, Samantha?" he asked, his voice calm, a gentle current beneath a stone surface. "Because to me, it looks like you've been funneling our savings into a house you're buying with your lover. It looks like you've been planning a new life while using me to fund it." Her tears came then, sudden and desperate. She reached for his hand, but he pulled away, his movements measured and precise. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far. We can fix this. I can make it right." David studied her, seeing not the woman he had loved, but a stranger whose every move was calculated. "You can't fix this, Samantha. You've been lying to me, stealing from me, and humiliating me. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. Over and over again, you chose him. You chose yourself." Her desperation grew, her emotions flaring like a wounded animal. She cycled through excuses, shifting blame, pleading, promising to change, but David's expression remained unreadable, his resolve unshakable. She was no longer speaking to the man she had mocked and manipulated. She was speaking to someone who had already let go. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," he said quietly. "The divorce papers will be ready soon. I'll be staying elsewhere until everything is finalized." Samantha's world fractured in that moment. He saw it in her face, the exact second when reality slammed into her. She had expected outrage, expected a fight, something she could twist to her advantage. She had not expected his calm departure, his absolute detachment. "You can't just leave," she said, her voice sharp and brittle. "We've been together for 8 years. You can't throw it all away over one mistake." 8 years, he echoed, his voice soft. 8 years of support, of love, of loyalty, and you threw it away, one lie at a time. "I'm not the one who ended this, Samantha. You did." Her face twisted, a blend of fear and anger. "You'll never find anyone who will put up with you. You think you're better off without me? You're nothing without me." David stood, gathering the folder and the evidence, tucking them neatly under his arm. He looked down at her, his expression a mix of sadness and acceptance. "I'd rather be nothing on my own than nothing to you." He turned and walked away, each step pulling him further from the life they had built, the lies she had spun, and the weight of her betrayal. Her voice followed him, a mix of sobs and shouts, but he didn't look back. For the first time in years, David felt free. The air seemed clearer, the ground more solid beneath his feet, and as he closed the door behind him, leaving her to face the truth alone, he knew he had done more than just reclaim his dignity. He had reclaimed his life. As David turned to leave, a sharp chime cut through the thick silence of the room. Samantha's phone, still resting on the table amid the scattered evidence, lit up with a new message. Her eyes darted to it, the panic in her expression deepening as if the device itself had betrayed her. David paused, his hand on the door handle, a strange sense of inevitability settling over him. He moved back to the table, his steps deliberate. Samantha lunged forward, but he was quicker. He snatched the phone and held it out of her reach, the screen glowing with a message preview. "Can't wait to make our new place feel like home. When's he leaving?" The sender, Eric. David read the message aloud, his voice steady and clear. Each word hung in the air, heavy with revelation. Samantha froze, her mouth open but no sound coming out. Her mask of controlled desperation slipped, revealing the raw, unfiltered fear beneath. "So this was the plan?" David asked, his tone edged with disbelief. "Not just to leave me, but to replace me? To move him into my house, into my life?" He held up the phone, the evidence now undeniable. "You weren't just betraying me, you were erasing me." Samantha's facade shattered. She had no more words, no more lies to spin. The reality of her choices crashed over her, pulling her under. Her breathing turned shallow, her hands trembling as they reached out, not in love or regret, but in blind desperation. "David, please. I didn't mean, it wasn't supposed to." Her voice cracked, splintering under the weight of the truth. The room seemed to shrink around her, the walls closing in as her carefully constructed world began to collapse. For the first time, David saw her clearly, not as the confident, manipulative woman she had been, but as someone lost, undone by her own deceit. The power dynamic shifted entirely. He no longer felt the sting of betrayal, but rather a cold detachment, as if he were watching a drama unfold from a distance. The betrayal had a new dimension now. It wasn't just about infidelity or stolen money. It was about erasure. Eric hadn't been content with stealing his wife. He wanted David's life. He had positioned himself as the replacement, a counterfeit version of the man David had once been, and Samantha, blinded by her own desires and greed, had handed him everything. David's grip on the phone tightened, the cold glass pressing into his skin. He no longer saw Samantha as an equal partner in this betrayal. She was a pawn in Eric's game, a willing accomplice whose naivety had led her into a trap of her own making. Her manipulation had backfired, and now, faced with the reality of her choices, she had nothing left to shield her from the fallout. As David turned once more to leave, he set the phone down gently, its screen dimming into darkness. "You made your choice," he said, his voice as steady as stone. "Now, you'll have to live with it." He walked away, his steps echoing through the house, each one a reminder that he was leaving not just her, but the life she had tried to steal from him. Behind him, Samantha's sobs filled the empty spaces, a hollow soundtrack to her unraveling. David didn't look back as he closed the door to the house he had once called home. His mind was already moving forward, detaching himself from the wreckage of his old life. The next morning, he made the break official. He transferred his half of their joint savings into his personal account, canceled all shared credit cards, and notified his lawyer to expedite the divorce proceedings. He arranged for a moving company to collect his belongings while Samantha was at work, taking only what he needed and leaving behind everything tainted by their shared betrayal. His new apartment was smaller but bright, perched on the edge of downtown with large windows that let in the sun. It was a blank slate, free of ghosts and memories. David filled it with things that brought him comfort. A secondhand guitar, shelves filled with books he had always meant to read, and plants that brought a touch of life to the quiet space. Each new addition felt like reclaiming a part of himself, building something entirely his own. With the emotional and financial weights lifted, David found himself rediscovering old passions and new joys. He signed up for a cooking class, not to impress anyone, but because he genuinely loved the process. He went hiking on weekends, the solitude of nature providing a balm to his spirit. He reconnected with friends he hadn't seen in years, people Samantha had pushed away with subtle manipulations. At first, he had worried they might judge him, but instead they welcomed him back with open arms, offering support and laughter. One evening, at a friend's birthday party, he met Jessica. She was 34 with a warm smile and an easy laugh. They bonded over a shared love of music, spending most of the evening tucked into a corner, trading stories and favorite songs. Unlike Samantha, Jessica didn't perform. She didn't posture or probe for weaknesses. She was simply present, her attention genuine, her kindness unwavering. As weeks turned into months, their connection deepened naturally. They took long walks, exploring the city and each other's lives. When David spoke, Jessica listened. not just to respond, but to understand. She encouraged his hobbies, celebrated his victories, and offered quiet comfort on the harder days. She never made him feel small or inadequate. In her presence, he found a sense of safety he hadn't realized he was missing. David's new life took shape gradually, layer by layer. His job flourished without the cloud of his strained marriage hanging over him. He threw himself into a major project at work, earning a promotion that he had once doubted he deserved. His colleagues noticed the change, a newfound confidence, a steady calm that drew others to him. His days were filled with real connections, his evenings with genuine joy. He played his guitar again, the notes flowing easily under his fingers. He cooked meals for friends, filling his small apartment with the sounds of conversation and the clink of glasses. He no longer worried about being enough. He had become someone he respected, someone who valued himself not through the lens of another's approval, but through his own hard-won clarity. Each morning, as light streamed into his new home, David felt the quiet satisfaction of a life rebuilt. He had walked through fire, but on the other side he had found not only survival, but strength. And in that strength, he discovered the freedom to live a life that was truly his own. Nearly a year had passed since David walked out of his old life, and in that time, the world had turned quietly in his favor. His new life, filled with genuine love and steady progress, felt miles away from the chaos of his marriage. Then, during a casual lunch with an old mutual friend, he learned what had become of Samantha. Her relationship with Eric had unraveled quickly. When the divorce finalized and the financial well ran dry, Eric's charm faded. Without David's money supporting their plans, cracks began to show. Eric moved out of their would-be dream house, leaving Samantha alone to handle a mortgage she couldn't afford. It didn't take long before foreclosure notices piled up and the walls of her new life closed in. Eventually, Samantha had no choice but to move back in with her parents. The woman who once bragged about trading up and building a fresh start now found herself back in the same small bedroom she had left behind as a teenager. Her parents, who had celebrated her ambitions, now watched her return not as a success story, but as a cautionary tale. She had mocked David's tiny life, yet here she was, living smaller than ever, her grand designs reduced to old wallpaper and hand-me-down furniture. The irony wasn't lost on David. He thought back to all the times she had put him down, the sharp comments and the public humiliations. She had once delighted in making him feel inadequate, yet now she was the one grappling with feelings of worthlessness. Her world had shrunk to the size of a single room, her future a blank page with no plan, no partner, and no path forward. When he heard the news, David felt an unexpected blend of emotions. He had expected satisfaction, maybe even a touch of revenge, but what surfaced was a quiet empathy. Her downfall wasn't his victory. It was simply the natural end to a story she had written herself. He found no joy in her misfortune, only a sense of closure. Her choices had led her here, and while he couldn't save her, he no longer felt the need to. The chapter had closed. The weight of her actions had settled, and the consequences were hers to bear. David had moved on. Not just physically, but emotionally, his new life a testament to the strength he had found in the rubble of his old one. He had built something real, something lasting, and in doing so, he had finally left Samantha and all her ghosts behind. David stood near the bar at a corporate event, the soft murmur of conversation blending with the gentle clink of glasses. Jessica was by his side, her laughter warm and genuine as they chatted with colleagues. She wore a simple, elegant dress, and her natural ease drew people in, making David's world feel a little brighter. The event was a celebration of his latest success, a major project that had exceeded expectations and earned him a well-deserved promotion. He felt truly at ease, his old anxieties now distant echoes. He was mid-conversation when he felt a shift in the room. He looked up and saw Samantha across the space, her presence a ghostly reminder of a life he had long since left behind. She was thinner, her once meticulously polished appearance now muted. Her hair, usually a perfect frame around her face, hung limply. Her eyes, once sharp with ambition, seemed dimmed, the weight of the past year etched into fine lines around them. She held a glass of wine with both hands, the red liquid trembling slightly as if she were struggling to maintain her composure. Samantha approached cautiously, her lips pressed into a small, hesitant smile. "David," she began, her voice softer than he remembered. "It's been a while." He nodded, offering a polite but distant smile. "It has." I heard about your promotion, she continued, her words careful, testing the waters. Congratulations, you've done really well for yourself. Thank you. His response was smooth, offering nothing more than what was needed. A brief, uncomfortable silence hung between them. Samantha's eyes darted to Jessica, who had stepped aside to give them space, but remained close enough to show her support. Jessica's calm demeanor, her gentle presence, seemed to unnerve Samantha further. I wanted to say I'm sorry, Samantha said, her voice wavering, for everything. I know I hurt you, and I've had a lot of time to think about it. I was wrong. David felt nothing. No surge of anger, no need for closure. Her apology, while genuine, was simply too late. He had already built his peace from the ground up, brick by brick, far away from the ruins of their marriage. I appreciate that, he said evenly. I hope you're doing okay. Samantha blinked, clearly unprepared for his calm indifference. She had expected anger or pain, something that would validate her guilt, but there was nothing for her to hold on to. Her expression shifted, a fleeting mix of confusion and sadness. David turned to Jessica, his voice gentle. Samantha, this is Jessica. He reached for Jessica's hand, their fingers lacing together naturally. Jessica, this is Samantha. Jessica extended her hand, her smile kind. It's nice to meet you. Samantha hesitated, then shook Jessica's hand. You too. Her voice was thin, almost lost in the hum of the room. She offered a weak smile before excusing herself, her figure slipping back into the crowd, becoming just another face among strangers. As she walked away, the contrast between them became starkly clear. David stood in the soft glow of the event's lights, surrounded by genuine connections and a love built on honesty and kindness. Samantha moved through shadows, a reminder of a life built on lies and quicksand. Her apology was an echo in an empty room, heard but not needed. Jessica leaned into him, her hand warm in his. You okay? David smiled, a real, unguarded expression. Yeah, more than okay. They returned to their conversation, the moment passing with the ease of a wave washing over smooth sand. David didn't look back. His ultimate revenge had never been about seeing Samantha's downfall. It was about standing there, fully present, genuinely happy, and knowing that his life, rebuilt and thriving, was proof that he had won. David and Jessica made their way to the exit, his hand resting comfortably in hers. The soft hum of the room faded behind them, their laughter blending seamlessly with the sounds of the evening. They moved with the ease of people at home in their own skin, their connection evident in the gentle way they leaned into each other. The warm glow of the lobby lights cast a soft halo around them, a stark contrast to the dimmer, harsher tones of the event hall they left behind. As the door closed, the camera lingered. Through the shifting crowd, Samantha stood alone near the back wall. Her shoulders slumped, and the glass of wine in her hand had grown warm and forgotten. Around her, conversations flowed, laughter rose, but none of it touched her. She was an island, surrounded by faces, yet entirely alone. The remnants of her past, the choices, the mistakes, the bridges burned, gathered around her like shadows. She watched as David disappeared from view, his new life a door that had firmly closed. A voiceover cut through the silence, smooth and contemplative. When those who tear you down are left with nothing, who truly wins? The question hung in the air, weaving through the scene. The camera pulled back, showing Samantha shrinking into the distance, a solitary figure in a room full of life. Her story was not just about what she had lost, but about what she had given up through her own choices. The real victory wasn't found in punishment or retribution. It was found in the quiet strength of moving on, of living well, of building something new and unbreakable. The screen faded to black, the final moments carrying the weight of the story. The voiceover returned, offering a closing message that resonated deeply. True strength isn't in showing anger, it's in finding peace. If you've ever been brought down by someone you trusted, remember, your story isn't over, it's just beginning. The words wrapped around the audience like a warm embrace, encouraging reflection and hope. The story that had started with betrayal and pain had transformed into one of resilience and renewal. It was a reminder that every ending holds the seed of a new beginning, and that healing often lies not in what we leave behind, but in what we move toward. The video ended with a gentle call to action, inviting viewers to share their stories, to connect, and to find strength in community. A soft melody played over the final screen, where the words, "Your story matters, keep going," glowed against the dark. And as the screen dimmed, it left behind a quiet but powerful truth. No matter how deep the wound, the path forward always exists, waiting to be taken. Thank you for joining us on this journey of resilience and renewal. If David's story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more inspiring stories of courage, strength, and transformation to life. Every share might reach someone who needs to hear this message, someone standing at the crossroads of their own story, wondering if healing and happiness are still possible. By spreading these stories, you become a part of a community that values truth, champions dignity, and believes in the power of a fresh start. We're here to remind you that no matter how dark things may seem, there is always a path forward. You're not alone, and your story matters. Let's continue to lift each other up, one story at a time. Stay tuned for more real-life tales of overcoming adversity and building a life filled with hope and respect. And remember, true strength lies not in holding on to anger, but in finding peace. Until next time, take care of yourselves and those around you. We'll see you in the next chapter.